We would be honored if you would join us.
All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of Dungeon Crawlers, where you have just embarked on an adventure that is light years beyond your comprehension. I'm just going to add that comprehension on the end there. I like that. We have an exciting show for you tonight. We've got Krebs, we've got Alton, we've got myself, and we have author Michael Haspil, which all of us are here to talk about a movie that came out long, long ago. And some of you may love it. Some of you may know about it. Some of you may be, what the heck are you talking about? But the movie is called Krull. Simple as that. There's no fancy things, no subtitles, nothing, just Krull. It is a movie that came out in the 80s. If I remember right, it was 83, around the same time. Same time as Empire Strikes Back. So
No. Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, Return of the Jedi.
Oh, man, I messed that up. That's right. Return of the Jedi. I know. Alton's like, yeah. Hey, I'm suffering from heat stroke and
and now the audience is suffering. Please go on.
Yes, I know. So Return of the Jedi. So it's not surprising. That this movie may have been overlooked. I mean, Star Wars is huge. But
it did win an Academy Award for greatest movie ever made. So
yes, but then that award got lost.
Yes.
I don't see it. Oh, I was going to say, I don't see that on the Blu-ray copy you lent me there, Krebs. I'm sorry. I must have missed it.
There's a lot that Blu-ray copy is missing.
Yes, it's the Universal Academy Award. You know, the entire galaxy nominated it, and it won that way. That's why you didn't see it. No, this is a fantastic movie. We're going to enjoy talking about it. This is one of those treasures that we're pulling out. And the best thing is we're going to hand this over to Krebs. We're going to let him lead the discussion because this is one of his all-time favorite movies. And I believe Alton has had the chance to see the movie because he has never seen the movie before. Is that up until now?
I have never seen the movie before the last 20 minutes. No, it's not true. Actually, I saw this. In fact, actually, this is a question I wanted to ask all of you because this movie is near and dear to my heart. It is precious. It is one of it. I have a surprising passion for this film. I didn't even know that I had this passion for this film until I started digging into it more and more, and then I realized, holy smokes, this is one of my most favorite movies of all time. It is not the favorite movie of all time, but I love this film, and I am curious for the three of you, what was your first experience with Krull? I'll share mine after you guys, but what was your first time seeing Krull? Haspil, let's start with you.
Yeah, so my first time seeing Krull, I want to say his movies stayed in theater a lot longer back then. So we were going to go see Return of the Jedi for the umpteenth time, and it was sold out. And so knew nothing about it, walked into Krull blind. And at that age, I adored the movie. I thought it was really good, but there was still a feeling that I might have seen it before. So we'll come back to that for sure.
Okay. And then, Dan, what was your first memory of encountering Krull?
So we saw it at the drive-in. It was long ago.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Around the same time, but my family did a lot of the drive-in. So I remember going to the Redwood Drive-In and seeing it there and sitting on top of our truck, you know, wrapped in a blanket, had the pillow, and just mesmerized with what was going on because it was like, holy crap, I have no clue exactly what's going on. Some of this is weird, but at the same time, I can't tear my eyes away from the screen. So, yeah.
And then, Alton, what's your first memory of Krull? When did you first encounter it?
So there was this little known podcast that I joined called Dungeon Crawlers Radio, and pretty much the only thing that one of my co-hosts talked about for, I don't know, it stretched into beyond my ability to remember.
Is it light years beyond your memory?
Oh boy, it's light years beyond something, that is for sure. But I had never heard of the film before coming on to Dungeon Crawlers and Krebs for a long time. I'm sure if any of you go back and play through the audio, somebody can put together a YouTube compilation of all the times Krebs talks about Krull, and it's always in passing. He's always like, I don't want to get too far into it. I don't want to get too far into it. And then we get off the phone and inevitably it just bubbles over. But I watched the film specifically for this episode, finished it this morning at 10:30 a.m.
You are a good man. You're welcome, says Mike Haspil. Yeah, and I have this running theory, and it's not perfect, but I have this running theory about like when you encounter Krull and how it relates to how much you enjoy it. Now, for me, the first time that I encountered Krull, the first time that I watched it, I was, let's see, it was summer of 1983, because that's when it came out. It came out when you are hearing this episode, it is exactly the 37th anniversary of the release of Krull, and it was like summertime, 1983, and my mom, a divorcee at the time, she took me and my older brother, my older sister. I was the youngest. I was only like 4.5 at that time. She took us to a double feature, and the double feature had another, at the time, popular film, Strange Brew. Which
I love that movie. You have a whole episode on that one.
Yeah,
what a pairing, though. What a weird pairing.
Yeah, and you know what's extra weird is I was 4.5 then. I'm in my 40s now, and I still remember that was the double feature. No one has had to remind me. And I remember the first movie to show was Strange Brew, and I remember, we got snacks and stuff, and we sat down, and I'm 4.5, and the humor of the McKenzie brothers just didn't. It was cute, it was adorable. They were in a lot of commercials at the time, but a whole movie, and I fell asleep. I don't remember exactly when it happened, but I remember waking up during that movie when they were having like this epic finale hockey game, and there was a goalie that alluded to being Darth Vader, and that got my interest. And I watched the end of the movie. I did not understand it. And then between films, you get an intermission. So, we hit the restrooms, we got a couple more snacks, and then we go back in. And I had no idea what the second movie was going to be. And we sat down, and there it opens up, and there's space. Now, as a kid, the first movie I remember seeing, like my first memory of going to the movie theater, was Return of the Jedi. And I obviously knew enough about Star Wars, because I remember being in the theater for Return of the Jedi, and I was asking my mom questions. Like when Luke first showed up in his cloak, I asked, is that the Emperor? Because I knew the Emperor was in the movie. And stuff like that. I just didn't know, but I knew a lot about Star Wars. And so this opens up, and there's like the star field, and I'm like, oh, it's a space movie. I'm in, I got this. And then, the music starts to swell. It's James Horner's music. It's coming up, and then you hear this like, and this like weird object flies past the screen, does a U-turn, and comes back on the opposite side. You've got surround sound going, and then all of a sudden the music hits a crescendo, and then here comes the glaive streaking across the screen, and there's Krull. And I was like, I love this movie already. I want to watch all of it. And I stayed awake for the whole freaking thing at 4.5 years old, and I watched it entirely, and I loved every second of it.
Yeah.
It was now, Mike, I hope you don't mind my asking, but how old were you when you saw it in theaters?
Now you're asking me to do math. I think I was probably 12.
Probably 12. Okay, so
I'm guessing around there.
And based on what you said earlier, this is a movie that you genuinely enjoy and that you appreciate to this day. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I hadn't rewatched it in a long time, so I rewatched it, and I came away with this opinion, a couple of different opinions. One, if any movie ever deserved a remake, it's Krull. The second thing I would say is like the promise of that movie. It's there, but it's almost like it's ahead of its time, so it's never really fulfilled. But at the same time, it's also behind its time. So I was telling my wife, I said, if I was doing the voiceover for a trailer for Krull, I would say something like, before there was Legend, before there was Labyrinth, before there were the Lord of the Rings trilogies, but after there was Excalibur, and after Star Wars, and after all the Errol Flynn films, and after Ray Harryhausen, there was Krull.
Yeah, Krull has like it's one of those movies that you sit down, and Alton, your view is going to be super important here. So you sit down, you watch the movie. It's like an hour and 40 minutes. It is describe to the audience what your impression of the like what kind of movie is it? What kind of experience did you have your first time this morning?
121 minutes running. Yep.
121 minutes.
Oh, it's 2 hours.
2 hours.
Excuse me. Like I should know these things. But anyway, so it's a 2 hour film. Okay, so you watched it this morning and it was your first time. What kind of movie is this? What genre is it? How would you describe it?
Okay, so I'm trying to present this in a way that is not inflammatory because I have plenty of episode left to piss everybody off.
I can't wait. I'm so excited.
It is drawing on some of the things that were said earlier, actually. It is Errol Flynn meets Excalibur, but now Star Wars has come out, so we've got to be kind of Star Wars-y, but not enough that it's Star Wars, because we really just wanted to be an Errol Flynn film the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You're hitting on some salient points, by the way, and we'll discuss all those things. And that's why I asked you.
My answer to when people ask me what genre is Krull, I just say yes.
Yes. My first foray into dungeon crawlers was I was brought on as a guest to discuss Rifts by Palladium. It's their RPG,
Mm-hmm.
and to discuss the Palladium system in general. And while I cut my teeth on a couple of different RPGs, including D&D when I was younger, when I was like in my early teens, I moved over to Palladium, and I've never really gone back. I've played a few other systems, but in terms of like favorite systems, I've never really gone back. And when I was describing it on the show, I called it the every game, because Rifts is literally capable of being every game. It's very much like GURPS, right? In that sense, it's extremely flexible in terms of the context and the domain. And so you can play, you can do sword and sorcery and different kinds of magics, and or you can do bionics and cybernetics and cyberpunk, and or you can do high technology and space war. Like, you can do everything. It's the every game. Krull suffers a bit from that, and I say suffers double-edgedly. When they went to go build the film, they billed it as a sci-fi fantasy. Now, what had happened historically, and since we've hit on this, I don't mind jumping into this hole just really quick if you guys don't mind, but what had happened historically was that Star Wars was this completely unforeseen success in 1977. They did it again in 1980 with Empire Strikes Back, and it was just an easy peasy home run in 1983 when they launched Return of the Jedi. During that time between 77 and 83, and I believe this actually is this would be a good time to sort of like take a nod at Mike's podcast as well, where you're focusing on like the brilliant films of 82.
Mm-hmm.
But during that time, all these other films with this awakened lust for Arthurian legend blended with fantasy and or sci-fi, there were all these films that came out, and it was like a deluge. And most of the films that you can find now from that period of time are laughable garbage.
They're on Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Yes, they are, like Ator, the Fighting Eagle, or the Sword
Ator
and the
is so
Sorcerer.
awesome.
Ator,
Especially when he's riding the horse across the field and you see the ATVs zipping by in the background.
Yeah, Ator is fantastic. You know, it's a film about a warrior that you're supposed to root for, despite the fact that he is like engaged to his sister and trying to like have an affair with another sister. It's
Yeah.
a very interesting film. Anyway, and then you have like Yor, Hunter of the Future,
Oh,
YOR.
yeah,
That one is also sci-fi fantasy in a way. Well, it's more like sci-fi and sword knows, but there's a little bit of swords. Yeah, it's like sci-fi fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
And then a film that was not as successful as they wanted it to be, but to be honest with you, it should have been more successful. Dragon Slayer.
Oh,
Dragon
yeah.
Slayer,
That's
which by
one
the
of
way,
my favorites.
with Peter
I had-
McNichol. Oh man,
yeah, with Peter
great
McNichol.
film.
I had never watched that movie until last week.
What?
I
Yeah,
had always
that's-
missed out.
You've never witnessed the movie with Vermithrax? Oh.
Yeah, Vermithrax pejorative, the best dragon name ever.
Dude.
Yeah.
And having just watched it a week ago, I thought it was fabulous.
Brilliant.
It apparently did not do well in the box office,
Right.
not as well as it was projected to do. And that's an important part of this story, because when the film Krull was first written, it was not called Krull. It was called The Dragons of Krull in 81-ish.
Yeah.
And then Dragon Slayer happened, and it didn't do well. And that caused them to kind of rethink some things. In Krull, you have these enemies called the Slayers. And in the original script, the Slayers were just guys in black armor with cylindrical helmets and T-slots in their helmets for speaking and for sight. They were just knights. It was just a medieval period. And what's extra funny is that the choice of calling it the Dragons of Krull was purely a marketing move. The movie at no point had dragons. At no point.
Wow.
But then Dragon Slayer failed. And there were a number of other sword and sorcery films that failed. And the ones that didn't fail kind of set a different tone, and they kind of sucked up the success of the genre. Beastmaster was one of them that kind of came out on top in the end. Even though if you watch it today, it's like, ooh, that's bad.
Yeah, Mark Singer.
Mark Singer is always the best, though. And you know, the films were almost always the same tone, the same tropes, just always writing the same thread. And so then they went back and they revisited the script, and they're like, as they were brainstorming one day, it was suggested, wait a second, what if it wasn't just medieval Earth? What if instead this took place on another planet? And what if the Slayers weren't knights of a warring kingdom? What if the Slayers were aliens from yet another planet? Because at this time, what other film was successful? Aliens. Aliens was also successful. And so they were like, okay, well, let's do Arthurian legend, a little bit of Excalibur in there, definitely some Star Wars, throw in some H.R. Geiger, and we've got something magical.
Yeah.
And that's where Krull came from. Now, hang on a second. Now, I know I've been a little long-winded, but hang tight. When you first watch the movie, it starts off in space. You see the glaive traveling through the stars, but that's mostly for the title card. And then you see like this spaceship that is more mountain than it is ship.
Yep.
It lands on the planet, and then we go into the setting of the story, right? And from that point forward, for like the next, 15 minutes, it's very sword and sorcery. It's just it's people on horses wearing armor with swords.
Wait a minute. They don't have regular swords. They have lightning swords.
We're gonna talk about that. They don't have lightsabers. That would be copyright
They're pretty
infringement.
close looking in some ways.
But they do have like these odd sparks. You know, my buddy and I were talking about that too, about what's the source of this thing, because ultimately it's not the weapons of Krull. By the way, Krull is the name of the planet, not the kingdom. It's not the name of the person. It's not the name of the beast. It
plays no bearing on the plot.
It is, except for the setting.
Setting is not plot, friend.
Literally not important at all.
Yeah.
Like Forgotten Realms, changing the name to Toril.
Yeah.
That's the game, Toril.
But hang tight. You guys are there. You're watching the movie for the first time. The Slayers invade, and then Colwyn kills a Slayer for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's that magical moment. They make this wonderful sound, which I discovered only recently is actually a totally popular canned sound that was replete through monster movies in like the 50s and 60s. But they had like slowed it down and combined it with some other modulation.
Yeah.
But if you kill a Slayer, and by the way, a Slayer is basically like a 1 HP ad in D&D. But like you stab them anywhere, and their heads, even if you stab them like in the chest, their heads crack open like an egg, and their bodies fall over. And there's this mysterious thing. What, Alton, you saw it for the first time this morning. What happens when you kill a Slayer?
Yeah, so here's the thing, is you keep talking about how when you see it for the first time, but you have somebody who's seen it for the first time and not consumed any extracurricular material. So let me give it to you straight, fam. You hit on a very important point earlier, which is that Alien was pretty popular. And so there's this thing that kind of, whenever a Slayer dies, again, for any reason, they just kind of pop open and this thing just barely out of camera kind of slithers into the ground and disappears.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like the Slayers are like the equivalent of a stormtrooper in Star Wars. You know, one
100%.
hit, they're dead. Yeah.
100%.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you hit them, they die.
Yes.
Which, it's like,
Yeah.
who would wait? They've got this fancy looking armor, but it doesn't matter where they get hit, they die. And then this thing explodes out of their head, goes into the ground.
Yep.
Which I'm
Yep.
guessing retreats back to the mountain ship.
Yeah,
mean,
and it's
body.
it begs, and this is like some of the stuff I was saying about if the movie deserves a remake, it's Krull, because that's one of the promises that I talk about, is the first time you see that. Now, I had completely forgotten about that. So when I rewatched the movie, I saw that. I was like, whoa, that's really cool. Like, are these guys like drones? Are they being piloted by these slime eels that are in their heads or whatever? And so as soon as they take damage, they're just like, I'm out of here. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to go get a new drone body and come back.
Well, me and Krebs talked about this. It doesn't even explain it in the novelization. There's like nothing.
No. There is a novel which Mr. Haspil, Mr. Haspil pulled it up and showed it to me. He got a copy. Last time we actually had Mr. Haspil on the show, Dan mentioned that he already had a copy of the book, and I was like, why don't I have a copy of the book? I'm the diehard. So I ordered it, read through it, and what's interesting is that the book it's an adaptation of the final script that they went to shoot with, because the script went through several iterations. I recently received as a gift a printout, not an original, but a printout of, like, I think it was the third edition, the third version, that's what it is. Version 3 of the Dragons of Krull. So that was before they finalized it into the sci-fi fantasy that it is, so that I could see all the things they did. And it was wildly different. But the book follows the original script that they decided on when it was just Krull. And it goes into so much more detail, explains so many more things, has longer conversations, is decidedly British in its voice, decidedly British, and all this other stuff, right? And still, even with the book, the 2-part comic book, which I have, the liner notes from the soundtrack, which explains a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff as well, which I have, the behind-the-scenes special, which you can see on YouTube, and also it's on the DVD, but not on the Blu-ray. Sorry, Elton. And all these other sources that I have, at no point is it explained why these, for lack of a better term, headworms escape the body, and no matter what surface they're on, they always go into the ground. When you see a Slayer die for the first time, it's actually like on a marble floor in a castle. And it's a brilliant piece of cinematography, because I think it was just straight sheer luck for the most part. But a piece of helmet obfuscates the physical exit of the headworm, but the headworm goes basically into the ground with no explanation of how it does so or where it's going. And that is how every Slayer dies. Doesn't matter if they're on rocks, on sand, on marble tile. It does not matter. The headworm goes into the ground and disappears, and there is no explanation. Now that sounds terribly like oh, that's just bad storytelling. What is this? What the heck was that? However, Haspil has hit on something, because this movie lends itself to so many opportunities for fan theory, and like in a good way. There are so many things that are just not explained in the movie. They'll say something in passing, accept it as true, and move on, which on the surface feels bad until you take a moment and think about it. And then it becomes this opportunity for a whole story to unfold. So we'll get back to that in just a moment. I actually want to change gears.
There's so many back to.
Alton looks like he's dying to say something now.
I know.
He is just,
because Alton is a phenomenal storyteller. He is amazing at crafting narratives and delivering them with the right level of drama and enthusiasm and punch. So I can only imagine how much he hates this film. And I would love to hear now, Alton, this is the part of the show where you get to give us your bare bones blunt review.
Okay. So here we go. I think that you hit on something very important. I'm actually glad that you talked about the reveal of the Slayers, dying, disappearing, burrowing back into the earth. And I'm also very glad that you guys set it up as something that was set up and then never delivered upon, because that was my experience with the film. I do not believe that this was a poorly written film. However, I do believe, again, not having any information outside of having only seen the film once this morning, I do believe that there were many, many, many revisions, but there were also a lot of instances of meddling and poor editing.
Oh, what would make you think
killed
that?
This film?
You are absolutely right. You are absolutely right.
The thing that I would say is, and I had this conversation at great length with Tasha after we watched it this morning, my wife, is that there were never any instances that stand out to me in which something broke a rule. There was never an instance that I could feel or that I observed at the first watch through in which something like blatantly disregarded something that came before it, or that it didn't follow logically with something somewhere. However, there were many, 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 many instances in literally every scene, every act of the film in which something was not set up and then paid off, where something just happened. And in the context of everything else that was going on, it wasn't like out of place necessarily, but there were a lot of scenes that were spent looking like they were setting up things that then never turned into anything. And there were a lot of problems that needed solving that all of a sudden there was a solution that in hindsight made kind of sense, but there was nothing that set up into it to establish it as a possible outcome.
Yeah.
And so the general feeling that I got from watching the film, I believe that Krull as a franchise, as a universe, and as a story is actually good. I think that there is a lot of space to explore, and I think that there is a lot of good to appreciate and love about it. However, Krull as a film is a very subpar piece of storytelling.
I can see that.
I feel that had the editors been more judicious in cutting entire scenes out to enable to flesh out other scenes to a point, the film would have felt more satisfactory, and it would have left them with more material to stand on later down the line. Yeah. But it felt like a series of vignettes with half of the information or 3/4 of the information filled out, enough that you could tell what was there and you could read between the lines and understand, okay, yes, this makes sense in the context of the universe, but not enough that to a casual layperson without any outside material, you would be able to understand how it fit into the greater scheme or why it was important.
Yeah. And the editing you're talking about, like, I don't want to dogpile on the negative stuff, but it's like, for me, this is why I say, like, it deserves a remake. Yes. Because there are certain things that happen that are frustrating when you watch it in modern times. For instance, when the Princess Lyssa is Lyssa, that's right, is when the castle gets attacked. Obviously, there's going to be spoilers in what we're talking about. She says that they should fight together, right? So she clearly thinks she can fight with him, with Colwyn, who she's marrying, and he kind of hurries her out of the castle and like, just get to safety. Her guards get ambushed by some slayers. She grabs a sword, and I was waiting for a payoff for that, and it never comes. Like I was like, in a modern movie, that's where we get to see Lyssa kill like 10 slayers by herself until she's overpowered or something, right? Which would be great.
That's where she would show that she's Colwyn's equal. Colwyn is a warrior.
Yeah,
he's a prince of another kingdom. Lyssa and Colwyn are the children of two different kingdoms that have been at odds with each other. Think very much like Capulet Montague in a way, but they are unifying their kingdoms to fight the Slayers. Which is not very well explained in the film either. That the Beast and the Slayers have been on Krull long enough that now the tensions between kingdoms is no longer more important than saving the world. And so these two are going to marry to unify their kingdoms and then thus make a larger army. And you're right. She does. In fact, what's funny is I didn't really pick up on this until last week when I watched it again. And Lyssa is seen like throwing a sword to a guard so that because he gets disarmed. And so she helps him fight off another Slayer. But you're right. She picks up her own sword and she's got that in her hand. And 1983, she never gets to use it.
Yeah.
And
then I'm sorry, Danny.
No, I was just saying that was kind of the mindset. The damsel in distress. We have to keep her in that. Nowadays we would have. If we do get a reboot of this, you would see that.
Yeah,
see that scene.
And then the storytelling, editing stuff that Alton was talking about. The biggest one that I would move is the acquisition of the glaive scene to later in the film.
Yeah,
because it's literally he gets it in the first act and then never uses it. Yeah. And then when you can see what
Chekhov's
it does,
gun.
And even beyond that, though, they do nothing to develop it. There's no additional lore. They don't talk about it again. He goes to try to use it and is immediately told, don't. For mysterious reasons.
Yeah, I would have rather seen him try to use it and then it doesn't work because he hasn't figured out how to use it or he's not worthy to use it yet.
Exactly.
Something.
That's one of the items that's one of the million items that the book explains better than the movie. And I do want to make it clear. The book is not long. It's like what is it? 328 pages, 356 pages, something like that.
Yeah. And it's not like, it's like double space and it's not. It's not a long book.
Yeah. It's actually 237 pages.
Yeah.
I thought it was longer. And yet I still thought it was short. But there are myriad things the book explains better than the film or goes into more depth or because of the power of the book, of written material where you can hear the inner thoughts of other characters, right? You get a perspective that the film just doesn't or can't offer depending. And the other thing about the book is that even though it explains several things better than the film does, it also does not do so ham-fistedly. It still leaves tons of interpretive openings. While it'll add some more detail, it'll add some more impetus, but it won't pull a Naruto and just explain the full history of why this thing is, right? It won't go detail by detail. It won't pull a Tolkien and tell you that the trees have feelings and describe them with flavors, right? Like it's not going to do that. But it does explain in better detail the relationship of the glaive to Colwyn, why he's the one who's able to get it. In the book, when he pulls it from the lava flow, it talks about how it hints at how he's able to do that without destroying his own flesh. And the moment he holds it, there is a bond that forms that he can't quite explain between him and the glaive. And he's even compelled to throw it away from himself for a moment. And then it returns boomerang style and despite its 5 blades, it lands harmlessly in the palm of his hand. He does it one time in the cave, and he did it because he felt compelled to do it. Then when he gets down off the mountain and he's down with Ynir, and he which is for those who haven't seen the movie, Ynir is the Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's the Merlin. He's the magic old man.
The Guardian.
The Guardian.
In Hero Quest, yep.
The wise old man. And Colwyn goes to throw the glaive again, and Ynir stops him. And they have one of my all-time favorite exchanges. I don't know if you knew this or not, but I teach computer science at a college. And one of the topics that we talk about is called recursion. And recursion is a beautiful coding tool, but it can be used, if you use it poorly, it can be destructive or it can be confounding. And so when I teach recursion for the first time, I don't want students to be afraid of it, but I show them 10 seconds of Krull. And it's the moment where in the film, Colwyn goes to throw the glaive for in the film the first time, and he's with Ynir, and Ynir stops him. And Ynir says, "Do not use it until you need it." And Colwyn looks down at him and says, "Well, how will I know?" And then Ynir, without even hesitating, goes, "You will know." And that's the end of it. And I show that exchange, and I say, that's how you should feel about recursion, right? So, but you're right. They don't really explain it in the film, but there's more explanation in the book. And
I would almost say that if you have not seen the film and you're listening to this, before watching the film, go find this trade paperback copy of Krull and read it. Read it first, because the story shines through, and it won't feel as tropey as the film does.
That's true.
And then when you watch the film, you'll have already figured out the whole story, and you can just see it as an adaptation of the book instead of like this kind of film that has a ton of promise and failed in a lot of ways in the execution.
Well, I mean, we never really get to see Liam Neeson fight. I mean, the one time he goes to do something, he dies.
By the way, everybody, Liam Neeson's in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, what a waste of a fantastic character. There's no, "I will find you, and when I do, I will throat chop you."
Well, he didn't have those skills yet.
I know he didn't have those skills.
It's a particular set of skills.
It's a particular set of skills.
But if they remake this movie, they need to have him in as that character again, and we need to see some awesome fighting.
I want Liam Neeson to be the voice of the Beast in the remake. Alton, go ahead.
So speaking of extracurricular study, okay, this is a popular thing that I have said from time to time, and I am going to draw allusions to Star Wars, ALL, right? I am a firm believer that media should be able to stand on its own. I also am a firm believer that, and hopefully this will be a positive thing, Krull does deserve a remake, because I believe that there is a lot of content there that was not properly explored. I believe that it could actually represent a larger franchise. And I believe that the failing that Krull has is, funnily enough, one of the big similar failings that I feel Star Wars 7, 8, 9 has, which is that in order to understand what is happening, you do have to have that outside frame of reference. Otherwise, go into the film being willing to very much read between the lines and just allow yourself breaks throughout the movie to explore the imagination of what scenes could have been, because oftentimes you do not get to return to them, even though there's a lot of meat left on the bone and a lot of really, really cool things that could be explored.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that.
The Cyclops, the whole bringing the Cyclops.
Oh my gosh.
There's a mythos there that they could have introduced. Is he the only Cyclops there? How did he get there?
That was one of the things that super stood out to me, that I stopped and paused the film and turned to Tasha, like, oh, that's really cool. And then never paid off. When you first start to talk about the Cyclops, they say they gave up their eye so that they could see the future. Yeah. Gave up one eye so they could see the future instead. I'm like, that's a cool mythos. That's an awesome idea. Like, I'm going to steal that and use that somewhere. But then it never comes up.
Well, the part that I adore about the Cyclops story is that they were betrayed. So they gave up their eye to see the future, but the only future they can see is the moment of their death. And what I felt the movie really didn't explore was, imagine in a remake, right, some incredible warrior, and you can show him just taking on 20 slayers by himself fearlessly, and they're just like, how can he fight like that? Well, it's not his time to die, and he knows it.
Yeah,
and he knows it, and so he can exploit that.
What I said,
and it would build so much tension then when they get to like the end. Granted, you'd have to change his death scene and the meaning of his death scene, but it would increase the tension so much when they'd be like, hey, come with us, we're going here, and he's like, no, I can't. This is the moment. Then I mean, people would freak out, like, holy cow, you know.
Well, and it would allow you to raise your stakes for your heroes earlier on, because you could present your slayers as something really fearsome and terrible. You watch people just get decimated, not just in the, oh no, we're having a battle and people die and it's not impactful, but in a very real, like, no, we sent 100 men to fight 2 slayers and none of them came back.
Yeah.
So then why is this Cyclops going out and fighting 50 of these things on his own? We've defeated Cyclops. They know when it's their time to die, and this isn't it, so they can fight. Like, exactly.
Yeah.
But how amazing of a scene would that be to see like 40 slayers coming in, and the Cyclops is standing boldly with his trident, just destroying this swarm of slayers.
Oh yeah.
And Colwyn and the other thieves or rogues are sitting there watching this, and I can't remember the magician's name at the moment.
Ergo.
Ergo is at his feet, and he's standing over him boldly, protecting him. Even though Ergo thought he was going to die. That would be fantastic, other than him charging in and throwing the trident.
So this was one of the, I don't want to jump too deep down this hole, because this is something that I'm hoping we can do at the end, which is changes that we would make if it was rebooted, redone.
Oh, I'm so ready for that conversation.
And I would, and this is the one thing, I'm only going to mention it now because it's relevant to what we've just been talking about. I would combine the Guardian figure and the Cyclops, because that produces a much more powerful Guardian figure that when he gives up the ghost, it is huge, because he's been sitting here kicking butt, saving the day, taking on tons of these guys all the time. Now he's gone. You're going into the castle. What are you going to do, friend?
Yeah. The only problem by doing that is you get rid of, at least because in the book, Ynir is important, because
this is true.
The beast came before, and that's something you don't know. This is not the first time the beast, his race has been here before. In the movie, it kind of sounds like he's singular, but in the book, it's a race, and they came during his time. And so that's why he knows all these things.
That's how the Cyclops could have given up their eyes, because they were the first civilization.
Yeah.
So
I can dance around this for days. I got
it. We all can. That's why.
And again, Alton, brilliant storyteller. You're so fantastic at it. I politely disagree with that move, because I think the sacrifice of Ynir is unique in the film. Ynir gives up his life so that they can find the location of the fortress. And I realize we're speaking about this movie, and we haven't really given a high enough context for anybody to follow this conversation. But the ship itself is a fortress known as the Black Fortress, inside of which is the Beast, this giant shape-shifting, semi-magical creature.
And the fortress teleports daily to a new location
at dawn on a planet with 2 suns, Tatooine. On a planet with 2 suns, it teleports at dawn to another random location on the planet. So you have you have a full day. I'm not going to say 24 hours. It's Krull, but you have a full day to get to the fortress and get inside, or it's going to change locations on you. And Ynir, they go to one seer who can tell them where the fortress is, but the beast blocks that seer's vision. They take that seer on a perilous journey to a temple where the beast cannot oppose his vision, but while they're in combat, the beast, being a deceptive and conniving master of the slayers, sends in a shapeshifter, a changeling, to kill the seer and take its place, which it does successfully. That means they just lost their ability to figure out where the fortress is. They eventually find they figure out the doppelganger, and they kill it, and they move on. But Ynir has one more trick up his sleeve. There is a legendary person known as the Widow of the Web, and she is Ynir's long-lost love.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my favorite part of the whole movie. By the
I
way.
think there is so much depth there, and we will talk about that.
This is why
flashback scenes.
this is why I think combining those two would be so powerful, though, because he is the guardian figure having this huge superhuman strength, this ability to have great combat, and he's got all the connections, he's got all the things, but in order to be able to save the heroes, he's got to confront that bit of himself that he's kind of pushed to the side.
Yeah, but there's also something powerful in Rel the Cyclops. By the way, his name is Rel. They say it like 2 times in the movie, and the credits don't even have it. It just says the Cyclops.
Yeah.
And in the card game, I have the card game still. In the card game, his name is wrong, but that's another story.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, they spelled it Quell, Quell. That's not his name. His name is Rel. But anyway, the important part about the Cyclops mythos is not only did they give up an eye to see the future and they were bamboozled and they can only see the time of their death, but if they oppose that vision, they will bring upon themselves great pain. And so the Cyclopes are conditioned to not oppose, that they know when they're going to die, they know when they're not going to die, which I think is a great point that you brought up earlier. I think that's fantastic. But they also know when they're going to die, and they've been trained as a people not to fight it. But Rel makes the clear decision to oppose his fate, and he saves the team in doing so, but he does suffer a terrible death.
And they really gloss over that in the movie. I think it's in one line that they say that.
Titch, the boy, explains it. This movie is full of exposition in 3 seconds, right? Mm-hmm. Like they give you 3 seconds of exposition and they move on. But Rel opposes the vision, dies horribly, but he gets the team inside the fortress, and that's what matters. And I think if you combine Rel and Ynir into the same character, you can't have that moment, at least not in a meaningful way.
Yeah, and you would also lose. The reason I love the whole thing of the hero of the web is it's implied that Ynir is somewhat of an immortal. Yeah. Like he's like Gandalf.
He's the ancient one.
Yeah, he's been around for a long, long time. And then he winds up sacrificing his life just to relay the information of where the fortress is going to be, and in a very unique way. I can't think of another story where, and what happens is he makes a pact with the Widow of the Web, and she kind of says, you don't have the ability to control time, but he needs to get out of there. And there's this big spider, beautifully stop motion animated
for its time. Yes,
for its time.
The crystal spider.
Yeah, by Ray Harryhausen's protege, I guess, who did that. And she pours the sands of this hourglass that she's shattered into his hands. And when he has no more sand in his hand, he will die. Yeah. So this guy is trying to get out of the web and go all the way back down the mountain. And he basically just gets within earshot of the team and hollers
at sunrise.
Yeah.
Yeah. He yells the location and then dies. He runs out of the sand in his hand. And I was just like, man, I can't think of another story that does that particular, has those particular beats.
Well, and not only that, the Widow of the Web sacrificed herself by doing that too.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, she did.
Yeah. So
there is a super deep unspoken story there. I'm with you. I believe Krull deserves a remake. In fact, the reason I have sort of become amped up and extra passionate about it in like the last 6 months or the last couple of years is because my inner compass is saying that given the current zeitgeist, we are moving ever forward to a moment where someone is going to announce they're remaking Krull or they're revisiting Krull. For those of you who might not know, I have a filmmaking background, and at an amateur level, at an indie level, and a couple of my film friends, well, one film friend specifically, and I have talked at length for years about how we would remake it, whether we, as both as a movie and or as a series, because there is so many open doors. There are so many hooks for story. The Cyclops is an alien from another planet. They mention it so briefly in the movie and they don't focus on it that almost no one even thinks about it. Ynir says that the Cyclops are from another world and they used to have two eyes like men do. Then he goes into the mythology of it all. He goes into the legend of it, and the part about them seeing their own death is the part that sticks out. What people don't realize is they are alien to Krull. So now Krull has the Beast and the Slayers invading, and they also have at least one Cyclops, maybe more. They're the Widow of the Web has the same name as the main woman in the flick, Lyssa, Princess Lyssa.
Yep.
And in the prophecy, because of course films like this have a prophecy, in the prophecy it refers to a girl of ancient name. And so the name Lyssa is referred to as ancient. Ynir is referred to as the old one. And he makes a quip about, well, not as old as all that. But he is well known enough that when he comes out of the Granite Mountains, it signifies things to other people, including the alien Cyclops, who says, when I had heard that the old one had come out of the Granite Mountains, I knew my time had come. Things like that. It's just, there are so many hooks that they touch on for a second and they move on, because for the purposes of a 2-hour film, the journey is a prince must save his princess and liberate the world. That is the trunk. And everybody that he encounters that is part of his team is helping him to fulfill this mission. And they end up forming a team on the road. Again, a common trope, but it's a team of like an absent-minded, what's what I'm looking for? A clumsy magician. You have a now orphaned seer in training, if you will, and a seer's apprentice who now needs a family. You have a band of thieves that join the team. You have a Cyclops, and of course, you have the wise old man and the all-around hero prince. And they follow this trunk line. But when you listen to every character's story, as briefly as it's mentioned, all of a sudden, this, pardon the expression, but spider web of connections branches out immediately. And remaking this film as a modern movie could do it some great justice. Making it a series, like a Netflix series or even just a YouTube series, would do it significant justice. And I have all sorts of fan theories. I want to, for the sake of time, and I know I've been dominating this and I apologize, but for the sake of time, I would like to move into like a lightning round kind of thing. I want to ask you guys to name 3 of your favorite things from this film, whether you liked it or not. 3 of your favorite things. Okay, I'm going to start with Mr. Haspil, go to Dan, and then go to Alton, because I think that is the level of difficulty from easiest to hardest for finding your 3 favorite things, right? So, lightning round. Haspil, 3 favorite things. Go.
Okay, I would have to say the entire Widow of the Web sequence. I loved everything about it. Everything. It's like a tribute to Ray Harryhausen. It's really spooky. It's very creepy. The entire conversation between Ynir and the Widow is, you're just going, what is there? It's almost like they're talking about something that's next level, and it's almost like they're 2 Greek gods talking, and you're understanding things on a mortal level. And they're not talking about what you think they're talking about. So I love that. I love the whole thing about the Cyclops. And then there's another scene where the Beast is trying to seduce Lyssa. And they have this conversation about power versus love.
Yes.
And it's so brief. And you're just like, it's frustrating, because you're just like, she's standing her ground. She's doing really well. And it works. But it's just like, it could be explored more, and it's not. But those are my 3 favorite things about. Well, there's a 4th. I'm going to cheat. The Glaive.
The Glaive. So hang on a second. You said the Widow of the Web. You said
Cyclops.
The Cyclops.
Oh, the Cyclops, and then the power versus love debate.
Yes.
Which is a great scene. And then honorable mention, the Glaive. Mother truckers. Yeah, dude, the Glaive. Awesome. Excellent list. Dan, 3 favorite things. Go.
Mine on the top there is that seduction scene where the Beast is trying to seduce her to pick him. And, he even goes, he sends someone, the blonde girl in the camp.
Her name is Vela.
And he's showing Lyssa that scene, and she's like, it's not going to happen. That is there was so much potential. Like Mike said, there's lots of potential there. and they didn't follow it up, because you got to. I would imagine this has happened day after day after day, that he's trying to get her to pick him, because as we know,
Don't spoil it yet. Don't spoil it yet. We're gonna get there.
Prophecy, whoever she marries, blah blah blah, and so he's trying, and she continues to reject him over and over, and I would love to see the frustration from the Beast, because you don't really see that. But I would like to see that was more than just that one time.
And I think that scene too, as a quick interruption, it reminds me so much of a film that came out. It may have came out earlier. I don't know. Legend
With Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
Darkness trying to seduce Mia Sara.
Yeah, sir. Yeah. And Tim Curry did a fantastic job as Darkness in that movie. Oh, yeah. The rest of it, I could care less. Tom Cruise. They could have picked a much better lead, but my opinion, Tim Curry, fantastic. Anyways, the Cyclops, I love the Cyclops. Fantastic character. I hated his death. Yeah, he gets squished in a door. Come on, give him a more fantastic death than that. But okay.
Well, hang on. He got shot. He got shot like 3 times by a weapon that was a one-shot kill on everybody else.
I know.
He got shot 3 times, and then he got crushed in the door.
Yeah, but still, I would have loved to see him dying by continuing to get shot and overwhelmed. Maybe.
Yeah. Again, it was the 80s. I think that. Well, we'll get. Yeah. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. Okay.
No, you're
all right.
fine.
So the seduction scene, the Cyclops, and what's your third?
Yeah. As much as I did love the lady in the web scene, fantastic. My other one is the scene with where Colwyn's in the quicksand trying to rescue that guy. Because you see the anguish and frustration, because even though he's just met these guys and they're scoundrels, as a king and a leader, he cares about them so much. He's willing to wade into quicksand and desperately try to save him. And that just spoke volumes of his character.
Love it. Love it. Alton, your 3 favorite things.
So mine are a little less concrete than what the two of you have brought up so far. But I also think that it speaks to the strengths that the film does have and the potential that it has, right? The first is that I do love the visual motifs that they consistently bring up over the course of the film. Whenever we are talking about our hero and heroine in their moments of glory, when they are rising to their potential, there is always flame involved. When we are talking about our villain as he is trying to entrap and enslave and make everything terrible, everything that he has is very skeletal, very bare. It's clear that he doesn't have much more than exactly what he has, right? And then there are other visual and color motifs throughout the film that I noticed at a very high level, and I'd have to rewatch in order to be a little more specific on it. But I do believe that, especially in a medium like film, it is very important that you have motifs that allow your audience to be able to engage with the content at a subconscious level to impart deeper meaning. And I think that is one of the few things that may have helped save this film after it has been clearly so severely cut down. The other 2 things are tied into an idea called Castle on the Hill, which is I actually very much appreciate their style of exposition for the most part, which is to say these are things that are just in the universe, and they don't try to shove it down your throat and give you a ton of explanation. They also don't try to over mystify it and hide it behind the curtain. It's just kind of like, this is a thing, this is what it is, and everybody goes, oh yeah. And so you, the audience participating in the story, are going, oh yeah, everybody else is good with this. I have enough information to have a context clue as to what it means, and I know that I need to pay attention to it for when it happens later. And so then when things happen that do have a setup, it's very easy to follow, and it still leaves a lot of room to be able to explore. And I think that that's the third big thing, is that I do love that there was enough thought put into the world building of this that there is still plenty to explore. I believe that one of the great strengths of both Star Wars and, to a degree, Star Trek as a franchise are this idea that they historically were very careful to keep the scope of any one piece of media to a very defined area, but still leave lots of little things that go out to other places, right? That are not necessary for you to understand the scope of this story, but that if you have that extracurricular material, it enriches it in a meaningful way. Now, there are a lot of flaws in this film, as you know, have happened in 7, 8, 9, in Star Wars in particular, where there are pieces that you have to have outside information in order to understand. That's a problem. My goal is not to say you need to understand it, but rather that your understanding is enriched, right? Stories have deeper meaning. You feel like you're in on a joke and that you understand something that other people might not be able to catch, not because it's necessary to understand it, but because it adds value and meaning to what the characters are doing and how the plot is progressing. And those two items in tandem encompass that idea of castle on the hill, which is to say that the world is robust enough, but we understand our scope. We're going to mention this. It is not relevant to the scope of this film, but if you understand it and you know about it, then it deepens your appreciation of what's happening and leaves you plenty to explore after you have finished watching.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Everything you guys have mentioned are reasons why I love this movie and reasons why it wowed me as a child, and still entertains me as an adult. And I think that having watched it the umpteen dozen times that I've seen it, and most recently when I watched it recently, my buddy, who's the other huge Krull fan, there's only three of us with Mike, but we watched the movie. It's a 2-hour film. It took us like over 4 hours to watch it because we kept slowing it down, watching it frame for frame, breaking things down, and we just analyzed it. And we saw things that we had never seen before, that we'd never noticed before. And they were small, but some of them actually added value, and raised new questions and things like that. What I love about this film is that you can look at it one time and you'll have an immediate impression, and you'll think you know it. And if you give it a chance and you watch it a second time, all of a sudden new things pop out. And it's not even just like, oh, I never noticed that person was wearing a necklace, or that color was in the background, or, it's not even stuff like that. It's like all new exposition, context clues, value in the film that pops out the second time you watch it. And then the third time. If you can turn off that part in your brain that as a modern viewer says, oh, this is such hokum, oh, those special effects don't hold up, that kind of nonsense, right?
They didn't hold up in 83.
Yeah, in 83, there were lots of effects that were just like, we're talking like barely passing. I love talking about the production of Krull because so many things happened that were great, and so many things happened that were just like, how did this movie survive? How did they ever get out of that trap? But one of the things I love about this film is that you can watch it over and over again for 37 years, and you can still find stuff you never noticed before. I also love that, like one of my favorite things in the movie, again, the Cyclops making the appearance again, right? Because the Cyclops is so understated and yet has obviously such a rich background. And the book doesn't really cover it more than the movie does, although they give Rel more opportunity to speak and interact. They don't really go into his backstory. And so the Cyclops is, I think one of the reasons we like it so much is that the Cyclops has been portrayed in our own mythos, in our own mythology and legend here on Earth. And it's been portrayed certain ways in Harryhausen films, and even in something as recent as Gentlemen Broncos. In fact, I think the Cyclops in Gentlemen Broncos were inspired by the Krull Cyclops. But anyway, and they always have sort of the same feel overall: video games, movies, books. But the Cyclops in Krull has a distinctly different feel and a distinct yet indescribable purpose in the world. But you know that the Cyclops has purpose. In fact, of all the characters in the movie other than Colwyn, the Cyclops probably has the most concretely felt purpose in the world, and more so than any of the other characters. And then third is this is going to take us back to the Widow of the Web, but it's not the scene, it's the story. Ynir and Lyssa of the Web, to be clear, Lyssa the Widow, they have they don't tell you how long it's been, but you get the distinct feeling that it's an ancient past, that it is past that is much longer than the average life cycle on the planet.
Yeah.
And they have just a tragic, heartbreaking history. But that history, and I'm going to throw this fan theory out there. I was going to do a whole bunch of fan theories, but for time we can't. But this one I want to share. The prophecy that is mentioned in the movie Krull at the beginning and at the end. The prophecy says that a girl of ancient name will choose a king, and together they will rule the world, and their son will rule the galaxy. That's the prophecy. And the Lyssa, the heroine of the film, she has this name, Lyssa, but so does the widow. And we discover that when Ynir is desperate and trying to get the widow to help him into the nest. And so he's Ynir and she's Lyssa the widow. She has this ancient name. The fan theory that my buddy and I share, and I talked to Dan about this, is that Ynir and Lyssa were the original fulfillers of the prophecy, or rather, they were the ones in the right place at the right time to fulfill.
Well, and you also find out that they had a son in that.
You find out they had a son.
Yeah,
which is also
in the prophecy.
Yeah,
but just like Frodo in the Ring, it's not enough to be in the right place at the right time to be the chosen one, Neo. You have to choose to continue being the chosen one. It's not a one-time thing. It's an everyday thing, right? It's an every moment choice. And we don't get the full story, but what we know is that Ynir got ambition and duty all up in his eyes, and he ends up leaving Lyssa. Lyssa, who feels betrayed and heartbroken when she gives birth to their son, which Ynir never knew she was even pregnant, so that's when he left. She found out she was pregnant after he was gone. She gives birth. It's a son, and she murders her son. And because of her rage needed a victim, and because of that, she is cursed to be. There's this thing called the law of the web, and it's never explained how it all happens. It's never explained who enforces it. There's just this legend, this myth, this natural force that's just part of the natural order that has confined her to this prison of loneliness, her and the crystal spider. And no one who's ever entered the web has survived. No one, until Ynir. My buddy and I think that Ynir and Lyssa, the widow, were the original fulfillers of the prophecy, but they failed to complete it.
I adore that.
And because of that...
It's really cool.
Thank you. And because of that, the prophecy basically recycled. It had to start again. Because we find out in the book, and in of all things, the CD liner notes of all things, we find out that the beast had come to Krull before. And Ynir is marked as a descendant, quote unquote, of the people who drove off the beast and the slayers the first time. So, and we also find out that, as Dan mentioned, the beast is not a singular entity. In so many of these 80s films, and in so many sword and sorcery films, period. You can even look at, well, Sauron has an explanation. But anyway, so many of these villains, so many of these like seemingly omnipotent creatures are one-offs. They are unique. They are singular. They're not part of anything. They are just themselves. They're a malevolent force, and we got to stop them. And that's the way it feels in Krull. The beast feels singular and unique. It's not the case. In the book, they explain that it's a member of a race of creatures known as the beasts, plural, because they don't have a better term for it. So and I think they even made mention that it was that same beast that came to Krull before, but I don't know that to be true. The point is, Krull had been invaded once before, and they won, but it was anciently. And then time had gone on, Krull got back to normal, and the beast invades again. And it's because the prophecy is in full swing again. And and it has to do with Colwyn and Lyssa. And that alone, like right there, that is one of my all-time favorite things about Krull, that the Ynir and Lyssa the Widow story could be true.
Yeah. Oh, and not only that, if they've attacked before, it could explain why the beasts have space travel and everyone on Krull is still kind of modern, medieval times where they're still riding horses and stuff. They were decimated and they're having to rebuild
Yeah.
and start over pretty much.
But there's also suggestion that they benefited from the technology.
Yeah.
Because and I realize I didn't put this in my list, but one of my all-time favorite things about Krull is that there's so much of it that feels familiar and yet is alien.
Yeah.
So like the armor of the knights and everything that are in the two different kingdoms.
Yeah.
It's this plastoid stormtrooper-esque like armor done up to look like knights in a way. Yeah. The swords look like swords we would build, except that the density groove, everyone calls it the blood groove. It's not really a blood groove. It's actually for stability and to prevent the sword from breaking. But that density groove that we have in most of our medieval swords, theirs is a full cutout, which can't be explained, but that's just that was their technology. You talked earlier about like their electro swords, right? Because in the movie, anytime they fight a slayer and their weapons clash, there is sparking and lightning. My buddy and I believe that that's actually the energy of the slayers. It's not the energy of the people on Krull, but Krull has natural magic in the environment. So they could have weapons like that. But there's obviously there are things about the world that are familiar to us and yet smack of being alien because it's still another planet. And I love that.
Yeah. Well, they definitely relied heavily on tropes. I mean, as you're watching this, you see the tropes coming up. That's why they
absolutely
did no explanations. And they did come off of Star Wars quite a bit. And it's like, oh, yeah, people will just believe that because they believe in lightsabers.
But the piece of extracurricular material I look forward to consuming the most.
Tell me.
The riff track.
I went to that event.
Yeah. You can download it right now. It's $4 on their site, and you can sync it with the app and watch it side by side with the film.
I did not
it is
know
hilarious.
They had a riff track, so now
it was really good.
Yeah.
I thought for a moment you were going to say the Atari game, which I have and which I played. I played last week, and I finally. It's a hard game. It has 4 scenes, and it's a hard game.
I want to take a quick moment and to mention something we've only briefly talked about, and I won't go deep on this, but the score.
And
it was something I had completely forgotten. So when I rewatched it, it's James Horner did the score, and in a way, it's like his practice track for all the scores to come, because there is so much Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan.
But Wrath of Khan happened first. But it's like I'm like, oh, this is the Motara Nebula. Oh, this is Reliant versus Enterprise. This is this. But you can also hear aliens. You can also hear the Abyss. You can hear the Mask of Zorro. And there's a lot of also Battle Beyond the Stars, which came before. Battle Beyond the Stars. I'm so glad you brought that up. Battle Beyond the Stars / Space Raiders, because people had to steal stuff.
Yeah. And so the score is like this undiscovered little gem, and it's pretty cool. It's very good.
I argue that the Krull soundtrack is absolutely James Horner's best complete work. If you take the work as a whole for any film he scored, I argue that Krull is the best thing he ever made. And it's phenomenal. It is excellent music. It has that swashbuckling. It has that Errol Flynn-esque feel to it that we keep coming back to. It has very Arthurian tones to it, but it also has ethereal tones to it. It has alien sounds to it. The love theme for Colwyn and Lyssa, adore it. I listen to the soundtrack on the regular, like now when I'm teaching and my students are working and I need to give them some time, I'll mute my audio for them, and then on my side, I play a Krull soundtrack so I can focus on what I'm doing. And it's excellent. And you're absolutely right. It sounds a ton like Wrath of Khan. I was actually surprised when I heard very similar refrains and phrases in Wrath of Khan that I really knew from Krull, even though Krull came out after Wrath of Khan.
Yeah.
Well, We are at the end of our episode, and if you can't tell, there are a million things we could talk about where Krull is concerned. I actually would love, here's what I want to do, and this is a suggestion, and maybe you crawlers can tell us if we should do this or not, but I would love to take an episode where, especially Alton, but anybody can tell me what they don't like about Krull, and I believe 9 times out of 10, I can tell you why it's awesome.
So let's get the emails rolling in. I want to see this happen now.
Go watch Krull. You can buy it or rent it on Amazon Prime. You can order it on Blu-ray or DVD. It's really easy to get your hands on. Check it out, or buy the riff track and then sync it up with the video. But go check it out. You tell us what you hate about Krull, what's cheesy to you,
or what you love.
I would love to celebrate what you love, and I would love to explain to you why the things you hate about Krull are actually awesome.
Are you Krull-splaining again?
He is.
I am champion-splaining.
So, yeah. Mike, thanks for joining us.
It's a blast, as always.
This was tons of fun. Unfortunately, an hour is just not enough time. I mean,
it is not.
With movies like these, I think we need to do more of episodes like this. There are tons of movies that came out in that early 80s period that are fantastic movies. At the same time, there are moments that you could they're cringeworthy.
Yeah,
right. At the same time. But there's still movies we love. There's also movies that came out in the 90s. One that I would love for us to do is Army of Darkness.
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Fantastic movie, but it's
another one I haven't seen.
Oh, even better.
Wow. You're welcome.
Well, guess what? I know what our next movie is now. But yeah, I think we should do this at least once a month, maybe. Yeah, we can bring Mike back. I know he's a great movie guy and knows tons of it, but this was tons of fun. Let's have you listeners send in your challenge emails. Whether you like it or hate it, I want to see Krebs be able to spin these around. I'm sure he can, but it would be lots of fun to do. And as always, we'll catch you next time.
And remember, heroes, tell your story, whatever may come.
And internet, please remember, be epic, don't suck.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
Dungeon Crawlers.